I cultivated these relationships over 5 years, and it got down to about 5 names, right? But 5 years later, when I was interviewing at the Gallery Group, this hedge fund, I had 5 phone calls of the heads of trading desks all around Wall Street who had now had an invested interest in my career because I made a couple of phone calls a year, and I was polite and I was respectful. And so the jobs I didn't get catapulted my career 5 years later. And so I think it's so important to cultivate relationships. So if you don't get a job, that doesn't mean like it's over.
Welcome back, everybody, to the SteadyTrade podcast. Today is going to be a very cool day. We are getting lucky enough to interview Turney Duff, who is the author of a New York Times bestseller called The Buy Side. That was on Amazon's best business book that year that it came out. What was the year it came out, Turney?
2013.
2013. Currently, Turney is a consultant on Showtime's new series Billions. He's also a journalist for CNBC, a public speaker, and he's working on his next book, which I can't wait to read. His career on Wall Street spanned 15 of the most dramatic years in finance. His early years were at Morgan Stanley and then at the infamous Galleon Group. And then he co-founded a billion-dollar hedge fund all the way through to the collapse. He's pretty much seen it all and done it all, and his experience can really help others with understanding this business. Regarding his book, The Buy Side, I want to say that I read his book in literally 2 sittings. I can't even remember the last time I read a book that fast, could not put it down, Turney. It was, certainly from my years in Wall Street, it felt like being home. And it also was just riveting to just because I wanted to know how it all ended and how it ended for you personally. So thank you for coming to our podcast. We were introduced by JJ Gorilla, Stephen. So I was like, oh my gosh, have to have you on. So thank you.
So you guys are all friends and connected with each other and then know each other?
Yeah, we go way back, and thank
nice.
you both for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. I think right now what I'm going to ask you is, what do you feel is, because of all that's gone on, we're recording this today, February 3rd? February 3rd, 2021.
Yeah, the 3rd.
I'm like, what day does it? It feel everything moves so fast lately. I'm kind of shocked at how fast the calendar is already blowing through 2021. But, last week, of course, we all saw the chaos with GME and Wall Street Bets and Robinhood not letting day traders be able to buy if they wanted to. So I'm just curious, because you are on, the buy side, what was your take when you first heard it all kind of coming forward?
It definitely felt criminal when they, wouldn't let certain trades go through. I actually got a few messages sent to me that day, and people were wigging out because like they were long something and desperately trying to get out. And this one message was like, he finally got out, and he was like, I feel like I need a bump in a book deal. Like he was so like, this one day of trading, like just like took everything out of him. And it was funny at the time, but yeah, the thing is, my opinion is the retail trader has never had a better opportunity in terms of accessing information, right? It used to be a bigger disadvantage. It still is a disadvantage, but the day trader, which we used to call dumb money, has never been smarter. And it's an amazing opportunity. My biggest concern would be them changing the rules, right? Like Wall Street doesn't like getting taken. So, like I remember, this is sort of similar. I got screwed in 2008. I couldn't have been more bearish, right? I ended up only being up 10%, which is kind of atrocity because I was so bearish. But it was impossible to hold on to my shorts because they were just like going straight down. But I remember the day when they stopped short selling, and it changed the entire game, and I got screwed because they changed the rules in the middle of it, and so it sort of felt like that. So I think it's a really exciting time. I'm just by nature I root for the little guy, right? I love a Disney film where the underdog wins. But the rules are going to be changing. They're gonna try to make it harder, and so it's gonna be a battle.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no, I'm just super curious, and it's a good question to ask some of the guys from hedge funds. Like, how do you view kind of trading, or how do you think new traders should view it? Do you think it's a case of longs versus shorts, or do you think it's a case of institutions versus retailer? Because
sorry.
Go on. Because sorry, I'll let you go.
No. I was going to ask you to reframe the question because I wasn't quite sure what you were asking.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, like I said, I started trading about 4 years ago. There's a lot of people starting trading now, and it's kind of put to people like it's a battle of long versus short.
Right.
Longs, bears versus bulls. But my experience as I've got more into it is it's kind of day traders versus hedge funds, or day traders versus market makers. And it's like, how can you be on the side of the big money, or how can you not get shook out by the big money? And I just wanted to know your thoughts on that, being on the other side.
Right. So before I answer your question directly, one of the things that like helped me succeed in my career was identifying the market that I was in. Okay. Because 2007 was not the same market as 2008, right? Or earlier, technical analysis was working great in the mid 2000s, right? And then we kind of came into a sort of a acquisition market where every morning I was coming in and like 3 companies were being bought out, right? So identifying what market we are in is paramount to your success. So to answer your question, I believe it's constantly changing what the rules are, or what the consequences or ramifications for a particular market is. So they're right now, it feels like it's the day traders against hedge funds, but like honestly speaking, on a normal day, hedge funders have zero respect for the retail trader, and they still do call them dumb money. But you know what's going to happen. Hedge funds are going to invest a shit ton of money into figuring out how to scrape data into these chat rooms and into all of these and figure out how to monetize that.
Yeah. Because to a degree, I felt like it was already happening, because you'd see stocks that should break down and they get held up. Or you'd see stocks that there would just be steadily inclining, and everyone's saying it's a breakout, and then you get the hardest rug pull, you get the hardest sell-off, and we always thought, it's the big money leaving. It's they've ripped it up to a break off to sell into the liquidity.
Yep.
And I just want your opinion on it. Does that happen? How prevalent is it?
Is it still prevalent? Yes. It also depends on what you're trying to do, right? Like you used to see more often, and it doesn't happen as much anymore, but you would see sort of quarter end window dressing, right?
Yeah.
But you don't really get paid. If you're a hedge fund, you don't get paid until the last day of the year. And there's a section in my book where I talk about it. I used to take, a list of my illiquid names and the last 5 minutes of the year, just jack it as high as I can, because I got paid on that. But there were times where I remember I was short, Express Scripts, right? And there was a huge short interest, and, looking at the chart, like I would load up on a particular afternoon to try to stick it to, someone like Alliance. And, if I could hold in there long enough, I knew that they would end up just capitulating and buying, and then I would sell it to them. Right. So I was trying to fuck with people depending on the price, and I'm sorry for swearing.
Yep.
It's okay.
It's okay.
But yeah, so if it was to my advantage to manipulate a stock price, I would do it because I'm trying to make money.
Yeah, and I've just got one last question on this topic because I know Kim's super keen to jump in.
It's all good.
But it's because I just know everyone wants to hear the answers to these questions on the podcast. But it's like, is there anything a day trader can do to kind of be less dumb money?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Wait, be less what? Oh,
be
dumb money?
less dumb. Sorry, my accent is tough for you guys. I'm sorry.
So, no, it's okay. So I'm a B student from Ohio University with a 970 SAT, right? And so I knew from day one that I know nothing, right? That's my base. I don't know anything. And the fact that I sort of took that attitude that I literally don't know anything, it made me infinitely smarter, right?
Yeah.
So like, I would say, if dumb money knows that they're dumb money, then they're infinitely smarter, right? So, I think that's a big part of it, knowing, what you're capable and what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and to really be aware of what kind of trader you are, and then use that to your advantage.
Cool.
That's a great. It's just great because knowing what where your strengths are, and part of what you talk about in your book is your willingness to constantly connect to people, build those relationships, which ultimately helped you really understand where to focus in the market. Like you were hearing the things that other people weren't hearing, or even with their research, because you were becoming friends with people.
Right.
And you said at one point, I respect people who played the game correctly, become my friend first, and then we talk business.
Right.
And that undoubtedly is why those people were willing to share with you that inside information.
No, yeah, I definitely needed a community. Like I wasn't going to be able to do it on my own. And I knew that, right? And I knew that my strength really was at happy hour, right? Like that's where I was going to shine. And I knew that, and I was okay with that. But like, here's an example of, so I had an interview at Lehman Brothers, and this guy was kind of just like a jerk. Like he was just like one of those interviewers who just like are trying to trip you up, right? Yeah. And like, so I'm doing the interview, it's going in like, and then at some point he's like all smug, right? He goes to me, he asked me a currency question, which I'd never traded currency, right? So like, I didn't know, and he knew I didn't know, and so he asked me, and I said to him, I go, can you give me a minute? He's like, sure. I get up, I leave the conference room, I go walk, and I ask someone, I'm like, where's your currency desk? And they're like, oh, it's over there, past the fixed income guys. So I walk down, I ask one guy, he doesn't know. I ask the next guy, and I ask him the question, and then I walk back into the conference room, and I sit down, and I tell him the answer. And this interviewer is like, I saw you ask my two guys. And I said, yeah. I said, knowing where to find an answer and knowing the answer are the same thing. And he was like, when can you start? So because I knew, I was like, I didn't know the answer, but you know what? I know how to find an answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that tribal like willingness to create a tribe around you, that's one of the strengths I see in this past year and a half I've been around, the depth of day traders. The day traders know how to rely on each other. And that's ultimately the power of what I see with Wall Street Bets. It's this ability to kind of have each other's back in a certain way up against the big bad wolf, Well,
and one thing I think is paramount to building that community, and sometimes when I give talks, I talk about put getting screwed into your budget, right? Plan on getting screwed or taking advantage of, because if you operate from a place of fear that, well, this guy's going to take advantage of me, or like, I'm going to give him this information, I'm not getting anything back. Like, if you operate from there, you are not going to like fulfill everything that your potential. And so if you plan on getting screwed, let's say let's say you try to make 10 new relationships, you know, 2 take advantage of you and it's not worth it. 5 or 6 are just kind of like nothing, you know, but you 1 or 2 are phenomenal relationships. Like, that's a home run, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not suggesting you got to manage the risk. So I'm not suggesting like you do something that completely puts you at risk, right? But if I got a good call and there's a new relationship, some guy that I met at the bar last night, or, you know, friend of a friend or whatever, I'll give him that call, you know, because we live in a favor economy, right? And the best way to get a favor is to do someone else a favor first. And so I'll do that a couple of times. And if I don't get anything back, okay, no harm, no foul, whatever. And so the best thing you can do is try to help other people. And then the other thing that I would just add on to that, like a friend of mine, he's a famous MMA fighter named Frank Shamrock. And he coined this thing, it's called the power of 3. And at all times he believes, and I believe it too, you should have a mentor, let's say a coach like yourself, right? You should have a peer, and you should and this is where most people sort of drop the ball. You should always have someone who is not below you, like in the sense, like I'm like not in a bad way, but someone who is behind you in, let's say, knowledge or whatever. And if you have all 3 of those working at the same time, you'll have incredible success. And people don't realize that by me helping, so I do a lot of screenwriting now, right? And I have a few people who are just kind of getting into it, and I spend time with them, you know, once a day, helping them, and I'm refining the basics. I'm, you know, regurgitating everything that I already know, but I'm making my skills sharper. So I think that's really important, is helping other people.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. It makes so much sense, especially for day traders, because I think even, you know, yesterday, very unexpectedly, I did an Instagram live, right? And Stephen hopped on by chance, and just us talking about it, and some of the other people, there were a couple of, you know, newbies who were in there, but just they start to talk about what they're up against. I just see all the time those who have been in it for a long time, like Stephen. And then there's somebody who's a beginner, and they'll see something, and even for me, I'm still a beginner. I can see that richness. It's like the tapestry just gets thicker and thicker.
Yeah, and actually, it's a good lead in for another thing that I used to do, which day traders probably could take an opportunity to do also. So since I was the head trader, I was dealing with the PM and all the analysts all the time, right? And in a like hectic or like quick moving market, it was more difficult for me to sort of get a read on what we should actually do. And so what I used to do on like Friday afternoons or like a quiet time, I used to walk around the office and I would have conversations with these analysts, and they would be speaking free of any emotion, right? And I would kind of get out of them and be like, oh man, he's like, you know, if Apple ever went to, you know, this price, I'd back up the truck, right?
Yeah.
They're not staring at the screen and they're not emotional, right? 3 weeks later, you know, I'm looking at like my little Post-it note on, you know, on my desk, and it says, oh, Apple, you know, buy it at this price, but the market's down 5%, you know, people are freaking out. I'll say to the analyst, I'm like, has anything changed? Anything fundamentally changed? He's like, no, but the market's down. And I'm like, no. I'm like, you identified this as a price, right? And it's scary, but that's when you should buy it. So like having conversations with people when you have removed the emotion from the equation, you get really, really good information.
Interesting. Stephen, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting you say it, because it kind of leads into the point of make a plan, enter, like make a plan, know when you get in, know when you get out, enter, and then stick to the plan. And because when you're involved in the trade, you're more likely to make emotional decisions that might be a mistake because you're making them with emotion.
Right.
I mean, but I don't really believe in that, though. I believe make a trade and constantly evaluate it. But then if you feel like you're losing objectivity, if you feel like you're getting emotional, then maybe it's time to step back. But I mean, what's your opinion?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, right? Like discipline is so key, whether it's trading stocks or counting cards in Vegas, right? Like you have to be disciplined. But you said something interesting to me that I remember I used to get so frustrated with some of the people I worked with. I used to hate when I would get a response that was like, well, I bought it at 87, and I'm like, I don't care where you bought it, right? Like every single morning you walk in, you're choosing to buy that stock at that opening price, right? So I don't care. Look, 99.9% of day traders are not concerned about tax implications, right? So don't tell me where you bought it. I don't care. Today, like what is the best thing for you to do? So I think way too many people kind of get caught up on where they enter the trade, because I'll tell you this, like one of the things people said, I had a great skill set at it, was taking losses, right? If I sell Amgen at 95 and it goes to 70, that's an awesome trade. Yeah, I lost $5 on the trade, but it went down to 70, right? So if you're good at taking a loss, you'll play this game for 3 decades.
That's one of the things that constantly repeats in the book is your absolute neutrality to loss. That was really quite astonishing. You really were not like, it was an effort for you to be in neutrality. You really were not attached to your loss.
I do have a secret, which I think I mentioned once in the book. So I was diagnosed with dysthymia, a low level grade of depression. So I've always struggled with sort of like suppressing emotions almost came natural to me. You know, you could blame it on masculinity and how I brought up and all of that. But that actually worked to my advantage of being able to just be like black and white, like, you know.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the other piece, there's one of the quotes one of the reviews that I read about your book, and the gentleman was Jeffrey Attic, and a Loyola law professor. And he said, it's a great opportunity to question the market drawing people with addictive personalities and make any connections you know of more with The Hour Between Dog and Wolf, which is one of my favorite books. Because of your struggles with addiction, because of the nature of Wall Street, and I really feel sort of that environment just kind of facilitates addiction in a lot of ways. What's your take on that concept? Do you feel that there's a certain kind of temperament that it does encourage it, even any kind of involvement with the market?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely attracts a certain type of person, right? And you know, that's not to say that Wall Street is full of addicts, because that's not true either. But it plays into it, you know. It was for me, it was kind of like the perfect storm in terms of, you know, my personality and sort of how I operated, and then, you know, kind of getting to a point where I was making like insane money, and like the action of trading, like it was all one giant cocktail. You know, the thing I would say is, which personally, you know, I needed to be more self-aware, right? And I went to Wall Street for the wrong reasons. I was there for the lifestyle and, you know, the money, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that took me years to identify was people used to be like, Turney, you're so driven. And I like, inside, I was kind of like, yeah, by discontent. Like I was never happy, right? So I wasn't driven. I was just chasing that next thing. And I did a TED talk, and it was called If Then. My entire life, I've sort of operated on this belief. Okay, so when I was making $22,000 a year at Morgan Stanley in 1994, I would say to my friends at the bar, if I could just make $50,000 a year, all of my problems would go away, right? And then if I could get that girl, then I would be happy. If I could get that promotion and get on the buy side, then I would have a career. So in 2003, I'm sitting on my couch down in Tribeca in my 2,700 square foot apartment, dialing the 800 number to Chase. I punch in my account number, and the automated voice says, your balance is 1,800,700. I hit repeat. Your balance is 1,800,000. Repeat. And for the moment, that money made me feel better. But what was so interesting was, like, in that same moment, I was saying to myself, if I could just make $3 million next year, then everything would be okay. And so it took me many years to kind of get off that hamster wheel. And the truth is, I still sort of operate in that fashion, but the biggest difference is awareness, right? I'm aware that I do it, so I can course correct, and I can kind of deal with it as it's happening. Like I remember when my book came out, and about a week later, I got a phone call from my publisher, and he said, Turney, he's like, there's some rumblings that it might become a New York Times bestseller. And I was like, oh my God, I hang up the phone. I'm like, if I'm a New York Times bestseller, then my life's gonna change and everything's gonna, and I was like, oh my God, I'm doing it again, right? But it only took an hour versus 15 years, right? So the fact that I'm aware that I do that is kind of given me a superpower. And it's the same thing with, I'm 11 years sober, right? And by admitting that I'm powerless over alcohol and drugs gives me the power back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you find that when you first, because you speak very, honestly and very vulnerably about what it was like as you tried to compartmentalize it, thinking, oh, I can hold it over here in a certain way and I'll only kind of dabble, so to speak. Did you find that you had support? I'm trying to recall that part in the book. Like, did you find support around you, or did you keep that to yourself, the desire to want to,
It was, if I'm understanding the question, I tried to keep it a secret as long as I could to keep the gig going, right? Like, so early on, it was, just my girlfriend at the time, who was the mother of my daughter. But I would hide things from her, right? And I had multiple drug dealers because I didn't want them judging me, like me calling on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. Like I'd break it up because I didn't want to be judged. I mean, how pathetic is that? But and since my book came out, so many people have reached out to me, and they're like, Turney, I wish I would have known. Wow. And my response has basically been like, it's better off that you didn't, because I would have lied to you, right? Yeah. Like, yeah, I needed to hit rock bottom, and I needed to help myself. But there were people before and after my second rehab who have fully supported me and has helped. And similar to trading, living a full and purposeful life also requires a community. I once heard, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And so it's like, you better pick those 5 people like well, right?
Absolutely. Be really intentional about it, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
I remember, sorry, it's similar to that. I read a book once called The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of the things I took from the book, it was very interesting, is you're going to attract the kind of person that you are, right? So if you don't love yourself, and if you aren't in a good, let's say, place spiritually, emotionally, and whatever, then that's the kind of people you're going to attract in your life. And so it's like, you got to get yourself right before you do anything else.
Yeah, for sure. And I would argue that that's even true for trading.
Definitely.
The more clean kind of that you are, and I mean emotionally, the better chance you have at being able to observe the market as an observer, and then make choices as with your patterns, with whatever it is that you're going to come into it with, and how you want to play it. But if you're not neutral, you're not going to be able to see. You're going to have your biases. You'll be looking through your biases, I think. Yep. Stephen, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, no, I'm still working the way through the book, but in the early stages, you were talking about the fact that you'd got a bunch of sales jobs, right? You'd had a bunch of sales, you got recommended, and you went, I think it was Morgan Stanley you went to, and you just saw the trading floor, and you were thinking, oh shit, this is something that could be really cool. I'm just wondering, like, did you know that? Did you have most traders, like, they were into reading the Wall Street Journal for a young age? Were you like one of those traders who just, it was born into them, you knew it was you, or?
No, I mean, I was a journalism major, right? Like, I showed up New York City in 1994, accidentally got interviews, but soon as I stepped on the Lehman Brothers trading floor, I knew then that I wanted in. You know, like, it was just something. You know, CNBC didn't even exist when but I will say, I remember I was like 12 years old, and me and my sisters all got like $500 from my grandmother, like when she passed away. And my older sisters were like, you know, buying boots and dresses and whatnot. And I was at 12, I bought a stock.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's in there. But you were a remarkably good trader. You were a remarkably good trader.
But back then, we literally, the way we got stock prices was the next day in the Wall Street Journal. The newspaper the next day told us where it closed. Like, that's like how archaic it was. But you mentioned another thing, which I didn't put in the book, but I think is important for people to hear. And I call it planting seeds. So I started at Morgan Stanley in 94. And in my travels, I probably had met about 30 people, you know, let's say like 3 people from Lehman, 3 people from Merrill, 3 people, like every stop, I would meet 3 people. And so about 2 weeks after I started at Morgan Stanley, I took my list of, you know, my names and phone numbers, and I went into a conference room and I started calling them one by one. And I'm like, I remember I called this guy, Mike at Lehman. I was like, hey, Mike, it's Turney. He's like, Turney. He's like, we don't, you know, sorry, we still don't have a job for you. I was like, no. I'm calling to let you know, I got a job at Morgan Stanley in their private wealth management. I'm getting ready to take my Series 7, my 63. I'm really excited, but I just wanted to thank you again for, you know, taking the time, whatever. So I went through my list of 30 people. 6 months later, that list was probably like down to like 25. And I called them all back and said, oh, I passed my Series 7 and, you know, whatnot. And so I cultivated these relationships over 5 years. And it got down to about 5 names, right? But 5 years later, when I was interviewing at the Gallagher Group at this hedge fund, I had 5 phone calls of the heads of trading desks all around Wall Street who had now had an invested interest in my career because I made a couple of phone calls a year and I was polite and I was respectful. And so the jobs I didn't get catapulted my career 5 years later. And so I think it's so important to cultivate relationships. So if you don't get a job, that doesn't mean like it's over. You can still cultivate a relationship out of that. So, you know, I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And even I think that's applicable for day traders, because ultimately, even, you know, I've been on the SteadyTrade podcast now 1.5 years. Can you believe it's 1.5 years, Stephen? It's like crazy fast.
I couldn't have thought that. No, I thought a year maybe.
No, 1.5 years.
Impossible.
And it's crazy. And yet what I can see is that people that I met 1.5 years ago, like so many people that I've met, and some of the momentum that's, you know, I'm experiencing now, it's from just these relationships, people that met you before anything happened, or a conversation you had, or something, contribution in some way I've been. And it's like, that momentum just builds. So especially for day traders, because I think it's a very important world to have those relationships, especially just because of the loneliness factor as a day trader. It's a very lonely job, you know. At least back in the day in finance, you guys could walk around an office and have that sense of community and encouragement. And even ball busting is kind of part of that family kind of feeling. And now, you know, but day traders have never really had that, you know, they've always been rather isolated. So that's such a great story. I'm so glad you shared that. It's really powerful. Very true. Very true.
Do you know what the irony is in that as well? You build a reputation by kind of helping each other. on Twitter, but the irony is we're actually all in competition with one another. So you'll be friendly on the face of it and help them to a point, but deep down you're thinking, I don't want them to know what I know.
Right.
In a way. So it's a weird one, but from
yeah. I mean, if you can get over that hump though, then you're going to be in a much better situation. Like another thing that I talk about sometimes, which I think people stumble on, is results versus your actions, right? So like we live in a very results oriented country, like city, like everything is results, right? And if you forget about results and only focus on your action, I guarantee you'll end up having better results. And there's this sort of magical relief. And I'll give you a quick anecdote. So in 2014, I was asked to be a consultant on the show Billions, right? And so I wanted the gig, right? And so like that weekend, I read the script twice. I took notes. I typed them up. I read them. I read the script again. Like I was an animal. I walked in there on that Monday, and I blew it out of the water. Like I just crushed it, right? I went in and presented everything. When I walked out of that office, it didn't matter if I got the job, because I knew that I had done everything in my power to make sure that I was prepared. And yeah, would have I been bummed a little bit that I didn't get it? Sure. But let me flip it. Turney 10 years earlier would have spent the weekend like calling people like, well, wait, do you know Dave? Do you know Brian? Like trying to manipulate the situation, trying to figure out like how I'm gonna manipulate this to my advantage. I wouldn't have gotten any sleep Sunday night. I would have went in there. Maybe I did good, maybe I didn't. And then the next 48 hours I would have spent just like obsessing of like, did I get it or not? Or didn't I get it or not? And so when I focus on the results, it doesn't work out as well for me. So, kind of going back to what you were saying, like not wanting other people to do well. If I only focus on my actions, I promise you, your results will be better.
Damn, that just feels like a Zen koan for trading, Stephen, doesn't it?
Look, and at the end of the day, it's a big pie. It's a very big pie, and there's a lot of money to go around, right? So there's no harm in building some good relationships. But the struggle with trading is you have a 3 or 4
how about this?
year...
I would challenge you. Okay, you have a quantitative number there every single day, right? Like at the end of the day, you have a quantitative, right?
Yeah.
Judge yourself qualitative every single day. And compare it, right? Because if you lose $10,000, today, but you make a brand new relationship and it seems like it will, bear a lot of fruit, like that's a great day.
Yeah, no, I actually think in that exact way, but I'll always say it's about the process, not the profits. Am I following the process really well? Am I sticking to the process? If the market shifted a little bit, did I allow the appropriate room to change the process? If there's a ton of Robin Hooders and the patterns are more bullish, am I shorting a little bit higher? Am I being a bit smaller until it does parabolic? So I am like, the money comes, right? If you do the right things, the money comes. But what I'm most curious about is the 2, 3, 4 years where you lose all of the time or a lot of the time, and you think, am I a trader? Like, am I a trader? Is it in my DNA? People will think. And there's a lot of people listening who will think, what are the characteristics of the trader? Can they be defined for you?
I mean, you took it to an extreme, right? Because if someone came to me and said, I've lost, $100,000 every year for the last 4 years, I might agree you shouldn't be trading.
Without that, just what are the characteristics that define, without any like monetary part?
Again, like I'll go back to what I said like at the beginning. I know nothing, right? I know nothing. I want to stay curious, and I want to constantly sort of try to improve. And like you said, the process, like if I continually sort of hone that and try to get better each and every day, like that's great. But yeah, if you're continually losing money, you're doing something wrong, right?
Yeah.
So wait, did I not understand the question?
No, you said it perfectly. You answered perfectly. I just loved when you used the word curious and curiosity. That describes a good trader. It's I think being curious in the market and always asking questions is the quickest way to success.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, which, you know, don't take this to the bank, but like I've also told people, I'm like, don't overthink things, right? Like, little example, I remember this is probably 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. My daughter's 15 now, so she was like 8, 9, or 10, and she begged me for a Fitbit, right? Begged me, and you know, like I'm like an addict, so like if I'm gonna buy something, I buy the most expensive one, right? So I spent like $150 on this Fitbit, right? She has it. I'm not even lying. 2 days later, it's like collecting dust on top of my microwave.
Yeah.
And I just sort of observed and like she never even thought about it again. And I said to my friends, I was like, we got to short this. Like I didn't overthink it.
Wow.
I was like,
Wow.
I'm like, this is a trend that is not sustainable. Like, you know, and so like I didn't overthink it. Or same thing. Like, I made a ton of money, might have been 2008, on Crocs because they were just so damn ugly, right? And I'm like, at some point, like this is going to be over. And so I was short the stock, and you know, but like, you know, I've also had losers like that when I didn't understand Netflix, right? I didn't understand the whole streaming platform. In like 2010 or 11, I got Netflix, and the library was terrible, and I was just like, why would people? And I didn't get it. Like, and the stock was like, you know, astronomical. And so I fought that because, you know, I thought I didn't understand the story, right? So it's not foolproof, but many times when you just have like a small idea, like it's worth putting a small trade in there.
Yeah, but just try and if the market follows what you think, then it kind of works. I mean, I know another trader who got on an American Airlines plane and it was full. And then he checked the stock price and it was low. And he just thought, well, this is stupid. They seem to be doing well. So he bought it and made a ton of money on it. Just silly things.
Yeah, that seems a little extreme. You know, you're on one plane on one day. Like, I don't know if my brain would go there, but you know.
But the curiosity, it's what you're talking about. It's curiosity. One of the quotes in your book, there's a saying on Wall Street that being late is the same thing as being wrong. And that quote, but I have to speak to this one too. Getting somebody's breakfast wrong is worse than losing somebody money. And I was just, when I read that, I was like, God, it's so true. Don't get the breakfast wrong.
Oh yeah. Dude, your career's over. If you get the breakfast order wrong, like your career is over.
It's crazy, but true.
If you can't handle a bacon, egg, and cheese order, you can't trade 1 million shares of IBM. Pretty simple. And I also like when I was at Galleon, I learned, like, you know, I tell a story where I had to stand in the corner for 5 minutes, but at Galleon, I really learned a work ethic that, like, I remember my direct boss asked me to find out something. I don't remember what the question was, but he's like, I need you to find this out. And I made like 3 or 4 phone calls, couldn't find it. And I went back to him. I was like, hey, Dave, I couldn't find it. And he looked at me. I thought he was going to hit me, right? Like he was shaking. And on that day, what I realized, I was like, unless I go back and say, all right, I made these 99 phone calls. I went to the library and I just, you know, discovered this on Micro Beach, and I did this and I did that, and I still don't have the answer. Like that's the only acceptable I don't know.
Yes. Yes.
So, you know,
it is it feels like, you know, from my own journey, it was like Navy SEAL training. That experience there, you just always delivered perfection, always the first time, and it had to be instant. It was just the highest level of expectations, where everything after that is like a cakewalk. It really is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And like one of the things like I loved about Wall Street people I learned to anticipate, right? Like, and little pet peeves would drive me insane. But like when I would see someone pull up at a cab and then they're reaching into their purse and they're looking for their money. It's like, listen to me. 5 blocks ago, you knew you were 5 blocks from your stop. If you're not getting your money as the car is stopping and handing it, and I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Like, anticipate. But like they pull over and I'm sitting at, like, I'm outside of the car waiting to get in it. And like, that's when they open their purse. I'm like, want to shake them.
Exactly. You know, they don't work in finance, that person. That's what you know instantaneously. That's what, and there's another quote where you speak about, you know, just how determined you have to be. What was the quote where you said something about, you know, just you have to, because you can do more damage by being tentative than making a wrong choice. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's the same for day traders in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, the timid get trampled, right? So it'd be the same thing with if you were playing football, right? If you go out there trying not to get injured, guess what? You're going to get injured, right? So like, if you do have a plan and process, like you were saying, and you stick to it, like you'll be fine. But if you play scared or timid, there's a really strong possibility that you're gonna you know lose. And it goes back to what I was saying before about putting in the budget, like getting screwed, because like if you're trying so hard not to lose money, you're either gonna lose money, you're definitely not gonna make money, and it's like, what are you doing, right? So like I'm not saying, you know, be bold and, you know, go skydiving off, you know, buildings, but like, you know.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Stephen? That concept about more damage being tentative than making a wrong choice?
No, I mean, I believe in general, just to focus on what you want. Don't focus on what you don't want, because you'll get it. Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
You talked at the end of the book about your goal now is no longer happiness, but serenity. Tell us a little bit about what you mean.
Sure. So like I was telling you with the whole if then, there was this constant pursuit of happiness. And you know, I was a couple years sober. I'd gone through family court. I was seeing and talking to my daughter every single day. And I'd gotten a huge book deal from Random House. And, you know, on the surface, everything was great, but I still wasn't happy. And I was like, something's wrong with me, right? And so I went and I Googled the pursuit of happiness because I wanted to know what it meant in 1776 when, you know, they wrote the Declaration of Independence. And what I discovered was sort of eye-opening for me. Happiness back then meant honor, courage, how you live your life. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I thought it was pleasure and, you know, material things. And so on that day, I kind of said, you know what? I don't want to be happy. Screw happiness. And I decided that I was going to make serenity my goal, because my belief was I couldn't sustain my definition of happiness no matter what. Like, you know, when I was making 2 million, I wanted 3 million. And so, you know, but I did think that serenity was something that I could maintain, where good, bad, or indifferent, no matter what kind of day I had, I could bring an element of serenity into it. And so ironically, on the day I stopped chasing happiness is the happiest I ever became. So.
Wow. That's beautiful. I'm happy that did happen for you. Really, really.
Thank you.
There's a good quote. It's from Mad Men, and they always say, "What is happiness?" And they say, "Happiness is a moment before you just need more happiness."
That's perfectly, yeah. I've never heard that, but.
And when you were talking about the story of if I could just make this, if I could just make this, if I could just make this, then I'll finally be happy. Sometimes I think maybe life would be better if I didn't achieve what I've achieved, because that was the same as you, but on a smaller scale. Like, if I can just get profitable, if I can just get $1,000 a week, and then if I can just get $10,000 a week. And then sometimes I think maybe it would be better to never have got anything, because then I'd be happy still thinking I had the dream that I could be.
Right.
Rather than achieving it and being disappointed.
Yeah, no, it's perplexing, you know, to try to figure it out. But that's why once I chose not to try to be happy, like everything sort of came together. And like, again, not a great anecdote, but like recently I went to the bagel store, and like in a matter of like 30 seconds, I waited and I held the door open for this older woman. Then I walked in, I found $20 on the floor, and I like, grabbed it and, gave to the person who had dropped it. And over there, like I helped someone like carry things out of the car, and people were looking at me like I was insane. I felt like amazing, right? And it cost me nothing.
Yeah.
Yep. So
for sure, that serenity, that's what you're getting met in those moments. Yep. And where do you live now, Turney?
I'm out on Long Island. My daughter is a sophomore, so when she graduates, I'll probably make a move. But I'll be here for another couple of years.
But you still get to have good bagels, so I'm a little jealous of you right now. That bagel store you were in, I'm like, ooh, what kind of bagel did he get?
Everything, toasted butter.
You're killing me now. I love that, everything. Thank you so much. It's funny because part of me, when I was reading the book, of course, it just lit me up around my experience with Wall Street, but what's happened in these last 2 weeks, and my own frustration with the way certain things are being handled. I almost feel like, that I'm curious, especially because you write for Billions, you still contribute to that. I'm curious, do you feel the temperature of that show will shift? Are you guys going to cover this story? Because it just feels like a shift is happening, right?
Yeah, but I haven't talked to the guys. So I can't tell you for sure, but judging from Twitter, they're not gonna make a shift. But we live in such a bizarre time with the news cycle. Like literally a month from now, like we might not even be thinking about GameStop.
Good point.
So I don't know, but
yeah.
I don't know. How
fun is it being a writer for them?
Well, I only consulted, but it was amazing. It was really fun. You can, in the first 2 seasons, you can definitely see my fingerprints if you read the book or if you know me. And in season 4, there were a couple of episodes that I contributed a lot. But it was an amazing experience. I'm now working on a couple of projects on my own, and I'm trying to kind of segue into film and television full time. I ghost wrote a couple of books after the buy side, which was fine, and it paid my rent. But when I wake up in the morning, like I love screenwriting, and so that's kind of what I've been focusing on.
Yeah, and do you have another book coming soon?
No, no. The work that I was doing on my other book is kind of morphed into a screenplay.
Okay.
So,
are you comfortable sharing what the screenplay is about?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. No. When you are ready, will you let us know? And we'll have you back on to talk about it. I think you capture your journey through Wall Street, and so much of the good, the bad, and ugly is your just ability to relate it. To live it is one thing, but to be able to speak to it in a way that is real and authentic and not condescending to anybody within the community or outside the community, that's a delicate razor's edge, and you really succeeded at doing that.
Thank you.
I think people will love that book, whether they've worked on Wall Street or not. It gives.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it has heart. And you show too. I love so many of the people I worked with on Wall Street, and I am frustrated that they get painted with a bad brush. All of them, right. And it just felt like yes, you did it. You did expose things that are not ideal, but you did it with heart and with a sensitivity towards them. So,
thank you.
Well done. Well done. Hard to do. Hard to do. Any other questions you have, Stephen?
No. Just thank you for the honesty, the vulnerability, and
of course, thank you.
The truth. I love it. I absolutely love to hear from the other side. I hate to say it's the other side. I guess we're all traders, right? But I love to hear from the other side. So just thanks for coming on. I think it's great value.
Of course.
For the audience.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Turney. I hope you guys will will read his book, The Buy Side. I think it's really important for you to understand the people that you are up against in your trades and to just understand their mindset and what motivates them, because it's definitely impacting what you're experiencing. So thank you, and we'll say goodbye for now. Hui ho.